So you're probably right. So you're saying that
Uh,
80% of the population wants to join EU, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Or
But
Georgia.
G- Georgia, yeah, 80% of the population wants to join the EU, but the prime minister says we're going to suspend those talks for now. That
Yeah.
to me sounds like a very reasonable thing. I'm going to be real with you. Uh, this is a clash between the will of the people and also the well-being of the people. This thing needs to be put on hold because the EU is faltering. Now, I'm not going to go against the people for protesting and everything, but they should be very careful because this is the same scenario that led to the civil war in Ukraine, which led to Russia coming in. Ukraine was supposed to join EU, and they just the Russian speaking president won the Ukrainian elections. They said we're not joining EU, and the reason he didn't want to join EU is because they wouldn't give them proper trade terms. So Putin said, don't worry, if EU doesn't give you proper trade terms, Russia will, because Ukraine, you have very valuable resources, and your resources are more than European countries in the EU. So we'll settle you for it. Immediately, the Maidan revolution started in Ukraine, which was funded by Obama and what's his name, President Sleepy Joe, who's not awake to hear us right now. Okay, so now they're the guys who funded the the movement with NGOs to turn the people in Ukraine against their duly elected president. Then after that, they started killing Russian-speaking Ukrainians in Ukraine over that thing. And then eventually Putin used that as an excuse. Notice I said excuse because I'm not going to say I'm pro-Russian to send troops. But it's the same scenario. EU is not giving Georgia the right trade. And once again, there are people on the streets. My thesis is that this is funded by the US because now the US is shouting, saying that how can Georgia abuse human rights by going against LGBTQ? They mentioned LGBTQ, which has nothing to do with EU. And then they said also the people want to join EU. So, but my question is, this is a problem for Georgia, not for America. It's none of America's goddamn business. What do you think, Kunle?
I think that what's going on in Georgia and Ukraine, the problems that Russia has with what's going on there is the same problem America has if Russia wanted to drop weapons, nuclear weapons in Cuba
Or
or
Mexico,
their
or
doorstep. Yeah,
Canada.
they don't want, and there was agreement to this with the Warsaw Pact and NATO that they're not going to encroach any closer with their weapons and their military upon upon Russia and Russian
Yeah, sorry, that was
interests.
in the 1990s. They made an agreement
Yeah,
after Russia, after the Soviet Union disbanded. They promised them they would not move 1 degree. Continue. Thank you.
yes, exactly. So all this dancing around by the Western governments, oh, sovereignty, sovereignty. If Russia tried to do the same thing back to them, you saw what would have happened
Oh well, sorry,
in the 1960s.
60s.
So
Yes.
yeah, so
To this
that's
day,
exactly
my grandparents hate Russians because they grew up during that period when Russia put missiles there, and people were saying you have to hide under your table if the Russians kill you. And I think that's what they're using to feed this Russophobia. But you have a good point. This is what the US is doing, promising these countries, EU and NATO, not giving them good trade agreements and just buying their leaders. Continue, Kunle. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of misinformation going about in order to provide the correct propaganda to keep for the Western governments to keep their people in line and behind them by demonizing the Russian tyrannical government. Um, but this is really truly a question about security. And Russia doesn't want nuclear weapons on its doorstep. They don't want the threat of a military response from the West having an advantage on their doorstep. That's all this is about. And that's the
Yeah.
same for Georgia, the same for Ukraine. So this is very disturbing for me. It's another leg towards World War III
Well,
if
which
times
we're going to
don't
get to.
change.
And here's my point now. So the Georgian president, and this is sometimes we need authoritarian presidents sometimes. He is not going to do anything to piss off the giant and the bear right next to his borders because the Ukrainians were marching. Yes, yes, let's break off from let's have a coup. The Maidan Revolution was basically a coup. Let's get rid of our Russian-speaking president and join NATO. Even after that, Europe didn't let them join NATO. Then they said, "Oh, fight Russia, we'll help you." Now, where is Ukraine today? No water, no toilet paper, no electricity. the people in Georgia should be thanking their president for not joining EU because they're going down a road in which they're leading towards their victimization by Russia because it's very clear that this is an antagonistic move against Russia. Once again, I'm going to also say it's none of America's business. Get the fuck out of the room, America. What do you think, Afolabi?
I agree with you. This has America written all over it. You know, EU
No, it's the
membership.
same pattern, and it's by the
Yeah,
same president. During the Ukrainian Maidan revolution, it was Biden, and now it's him again. Biden's son was on the board of trustees for Ukrainian gas. Biden is still linked to Georgia.
yeah.
We'll talk about another day about Biden letting his son go, but also if I were president, I'll let my son go too. But continue, Afolabi. Continue. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah.
Yes, it's unfortunate that the 80% of the population that are in support of joining the EU are somehow deluded because the EU membership is like a trap. Often it requires aligning with EU policies. This can limit the nation's autonomy and its ability to operate on its own. It
Yeah,
limits
because they don't get economic advantage.
They
No.
don't have economic advantage in areas such as trade, the judiciary, foreign relations. So the remaining outside the EU, Georgia retains flexibility. It will help their economy to grow better and give them opportunity.
Sovereignty. Yeah.
Yes, sovereignty, and give them opportunity to choose their alliances the way to favor their economic interest. You know, the EU is a
Okay.
trap, and the EU is being controlled by the US anyway. EU membership offers access to a single market, but they will become over reliant on economic policies on European economies, and it could hurt Georgia in the long run. That's what I feel personally.
Brilliant. So here's where we're getting to right now is that um, these people are saying that the people who are supporting the 80% of the people they're supporting is saying that they are more European than they are probably Slavic, but they're saying they're more European, and part of European culture is LGBTQ and all of this. So what they're saying is that their constitution defends them joining EU. That's a lie. And Kunle Williams, you're a lawyer. The constitution of these countries, even though they have European values, that doesn't mean that you now join the EU. They're playing around with words. And once again, this is a liberal movement which focuses on gay rights. I'm not against gay rights. I'm for them, but they're choosing those things as the most important thing rather than economic well-being and avoiding World War II. What are your thoughts as a lawyer, Kunle Williams? Yeah.
Well, I mean, looking at it from a standpoint of view, I mean, Turkey is not really an LGBTQ country, whilst it's part of NATO. This LGBTQ agenda.
No, but what I'm saying is that Kunle, what I'm saying is that the argument of some people is that uh, they're not upholding the values of their constitution because they don't want to join a European because they have European values. But the way I understand it, constitutions aren't about European or so and so values. They're about human values and also protecting the population. What do you think, Kunle? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, and these values don't really have anything. I mean, I don't really have. I have no position. I'm neither for or against LGBTQ.
Oh yeah, me too.
But,
yeah.
But my issue is when it comes to sovereignty, the way that they've used it to threaten developing countries, they've used it to threaten European countries. They're losing the battle so much in Africa that they had to abandon that agenda in order to do business in Africa. They started demonizing any Western country, any African country or developing country that did not support
Angola,
this LGBTQ agenda, which involves men identifying as women and compromising women's rights and all sorts of complicated nonsense.
And they make it a do or die issue. Like we would rather get into a nuclear war and defend gay marriage. That's idiocy. Yes. Because if we have a nuclear war, there'll be no marriage. Go ahead.
Yes,
sorry.
And people in these countries, they're not really bothered with sexuality from their governments. They're bothered with where they're going to get their next meal, whether they're going to have a roof over their heads, whether they're going to get.
I was going to say a very bad joke. They probably, like in Georgia, they're probably sleeping with goats too.
Let
me stop. Let me stop.
Trans animalism. Carried away with this sexual agenda, which really is not really the primary concern of most of these countries. That most of these countries just want to eat, work, live, security,
and get fuel.
Home, and peace and move about. And it's got nothing to do with that. And you're now bringing something like that. I mean, and also it's a very oppressive stance because if you refuse to kneel for BLM, nobody ever got sanctioned for refusing to kneel for BLM.
Yeah.
But people get sanctioned for refusing to support LGBTQ. So I'm
We
sorry.
there's a word for that. It
Oppressive.
starts
It's
with
not the
F.
same thing.
It's called
Yeah.
fascism.
Yes, I mean, we saw it in the football as well. We saw Guehi and some of these people. It's ironic. They're wearing this rainbow badge that's, it's a political stance. I'm sorry. And it says, I support whatever. And then the guy writes, Jesus love you on the rainbow badge. And they want to sanction him because they say you can't. So you can
Now,
promote your
wow.
agenda if it's sexual deviancy, but you cannot promote your agenda if it's a religion that says
Okay,
love your neighbor and don't kill, don't steal.
Bakule, if you say that Palestine is free from the river to the sea, or you say that Israel is wrong, they call you anti-Semitic. So it shows you their values. They don't care about children who are getting their brains blown off in Israel. They give a fuck about whether you can get married, which is important too. But you don't step up for human lives. They can go to hell. Quickly finish your point, then we'll go to Afolabi. Thank you, Kunle.
Yeah, so they need to leave this sexual agenda and try to focus on the well-being of its of the peoples of this country.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think that I'm happy from that position. Two ways Trump will help. One, I think his withdrawal from Europe in terms of Ukraine, it will also pass into Georgia. He's not going to want to have a problem with.
From what I've heard,
and then also well, let me not use the word rational because it's biased, but let me say they have a position on sexuality that I'm a bit more comfortable, except that it's a bit cruel. I think that,
we're not going to lie. There are human rights. So let me give you an example.
Yes.
There are human rights issues in Russia. Okay. There are human rights issues in America. If black guys are getting shot by cops mercilessly, there are human rights issues in Nigeria. Tribalism and rubbish. There are human rights issues in South Africa, xenophobia. So what I'm saying is that this is a problem of humanity, but we're not going to isolate one country on one issue and make it look like they're evil. What do you think, Kunle? No, what do you think, Afolabi? Then we're going to Kunle.
Let's when Western governments use their arrogance to impose what they believe. When they first came into Africa, we had Madame Tinubu. She was a woman political leader. But the Europeans and the West said, it is wrong for women to have positions like that. They should not be heard. They should not be seen. They're supposed to be quiet. And then we Africans are stupid for allowing women to take part in politics and things like that. African 150 years of being indoctrinated
African
into
culture
nonsense. Now we're backward for following what they said we should do.
No, before the Westerners came, our cultures were highly balanced between matriarchy and patriarchy, especially the Yoruba. Yeah. I would even argue that the Yoruba culture is even more matriarchal. Thank you, Kunle. What do you think, Afolabi?
Yes, it's dictated by Britain, not by us. We weren't like that before them, and now they're telling us we're backward, and to now go back to what we were doing before. And they're just dictating to us.
What are your thoughts, Afolabi? Also, guys, very good show. Thank you. What are your thoughts, Afolabi?
Yeah, Georgia, they run the risk of being exploited by some bully nations in EU. In some cases, smaller member states of the EU, they find themselves overshadowed by larger economies within the EU. So by not joining, Georgia avoids being in a position where its economy might be exploited. They could exploit the economy. It could be marginalized in favor of the interests of some of these bigger bully countries. So they have the flexibility of entering into bilateral agreements, trade partnerships with whoever without recourse to anybody. And then there won't be any kind of public discontent because EU integration often comes with social and economic adjustments, austerity measures, market liberalization. A lot of internal pressure is on the economy. With the EU membership, they are going to be forced to do those things. But if they're out of the EU, they have the flexibility of growing their economy at their own pace without necessarily following a set of rules. Nothing is cast in stone. Basically, that's the way I see it.
I agree, but this is part of a bigger movement. I'm not going to say that we're heading towards a hot war, World War III, but we're heading towards World War III, which is going to be more territorial. We're seeing it in
close. We're really very close.
Yeah, we're close. But my prediction is that there'll be a lot of proxy wars. We're seeing it in the Francophone Northern African countries, Mali and Co., which are breaking off. And then we're seeing it with Taiwan and China, and the U.S. has its arms spread. So we're going to quickly end with this. So now in Korea, the president of Korea has called state of emergency martial law, and it's backfired. People are asking for him to be thrown down, and he said it was to defend against the communism in in North Korea. But the truth of the matter is that he's unpopular, and people are tired of South Korea taking America's line and want South Korea to be more sovereign. But now he's saying that North Korea is a threat. They're communists. It's the same thing as Americans saying we need to defend Ukraine because if we don't defend Ukraine, then Russia will come and attack us. It's another rubbish, but it's part of the bigger proxy war, which could lead to a world war, especially now since Biden is giving long-range missiles to Ukraine. But we're going to focus more on the Korean thing very quickly. What are your thoughts, Kunle? Then we'll end with Afolabi.
Yeah. They're trying to say that they don't want to make the mistakes of the past in the appeasement policies leading up to World War II, and they want to be proactive. That's the lie that they hide behind the intention of what they're trying to do. In Korea and in Taiwan, this has all been about the battle against communism, communist China, communist Russia, and they've always seen it as an ideological battle. Western governments have always seen everything as fight. The reason they've been so dominant is because they've been able to do organized violence better than anyone else. That's the forte of it. It's nothing else. And that's the problem that we're facing with these policies in Korea and Taiwan, is that there's lots of nonsense.
Sorry to interrupt you. Also, the money that's sent to the money sent for through nonprofit organizations to. Sorry to interrupt you. Also to Georgia and now to Korea. It's American money that's through non-NGOs to bring these uprisings to help American hegemony. Sorry, continue.
Yes, I'm used to follow these things without question. When Russia invaded Ukraine, I'm telling you, I had no doubt Russia was in the wrong, and everything changed unrelatedly from October 7th, because when you learned from October 7th who was the puppeteers behind America. Now, many people say they knew before. I did not know before, and I'm a historian, I'm a well-educated person. I did not know so much about the agenda of Israel and how it was controlled by America.
Okay, but Kunle, can I say one point? I did, because I've been following the left.
Everything, yes.
Sorry, Kunle, before October the 7th, Israel, and you know this to be true also, Afolabi, for about a year and a half, Israel had been encroaching into Palestine with soldiers and killing people and taking their land. And that's why October 7th happened. Is that not true, Afolabi?
Yes, absolutely. That's very true. That's
very true. But the media has even though you didn't know it, it was known, Kunle.
Yeah.
It was known, Kunle.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I agree with you. Most people didn't know. But if you follow the left very closely, we've known that this is what's going on. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, I didn't really know. I mean, I actually thought the Palestinians were wrong. I felt quite disgusted with myself. Even the Yom Kippur War, the 7-day war, I was just coming to learn that, we thought it was like a preemptive strike against several nations that were threatening to attack Israel. It wasn't at all. It wasn't at all. Those countries
that's propaganda. When I was young too, because in school they taught us Egypt and the Palestinians and everybody in Lebanon attacked Israel, and the mighty Israel's like David and Goliath beat Goliath. That's what I was taught when I was young too. Yeah. Continue, sorry.
And then you hear this nonsense. Oh, they hate us because we've got nice cars and we've got nice houses and we've got trades, and that's why they hate us, because we're living so well.
Sorry.
That doesn't even make any sense. I mean, that is the accusation when they're trying to say, why are these people so crazy? Why are they just suddenly trying to?
Well, Kunle,
they say they want to.
Only one country has stood up for Palestine, South Africa, and there's a reason why, because they identify Israel-Palestine situation as a white settler apartheid, and wherever you are in the world, South Africa's on our side. Africa is on the side of Palestine. The rest of you can go to hell.
South Africa has seen it. They've been there. They know what it's about. They're like sort of like, you defeated something that's terrible and you see it happening somewhere else. You're like, I know everything about what's going on here. And what happened it reminds me of what was that movie in America, the show in America where we found out about the city that was destroyed. It's also an area for racetracks.
Oh yeah, in Oklahoma. Yeah.
Oklahoma, yes.
And with black people destroyed. A city of black people who were economically independent, and they were destroyed.
And they were bombed, with planes and bombs and military aircraft and all sorts. And they did something similar in Wilmington at the turn of the 20th century.
Also Philadelphia.
Where Biden comes from, on a train station away from where he was.
Wilmington, Delaware.
That was the only coup. Yeah. That was a coup that happened in America involving, because Wilmington was voted in by, there's a black population that won the election. So they just staged a coup. You know, these kind of things are not really mentioned, or they try to ignore it in US
Yeah.
history. But these things come out and pop out, and then you start learning more and more things, and then you become a bit more disgusted at the truth you learn. And then you're trying to reassess your values and where you stand with these people. But then you now realize the people of the Western governments in America and so on, that, okay, it's the governments themselves. But the
Yeah.
problem the West is having now, anytime they go far right, a war starts. Because when they start going far right, they become too arrogant, too vain. The vanity gets out of control.
Yeah, but I think the
And
banks are betting on it
I'm
because this
better
is
than
what
you,
happened with
so we
Hitler.
don't have the right to live.
The banks are betting on
then
it. Yeah.
if you keep doing that, eventually you're going to have conflict. And
Yeah, the
that is
banks
the
bet on it.
problem
What the
with,
banks do is they bring this far right, far left liberal BS. Then they know that the result will be a right wing response, and it will lead to a war.
yes.
Thank you, Kunle.
Far
This
right
is a
is
very
just
complex
vanity
stuff.
out of control.
Yeah,
Vanity out of control.
we're gonna end now, but thank you, Kunle. This is one of our best shows. Am I lying?
Yeah,
I guess
you're
it's
right.
because the three of us. The rest
Absolutely.
of I want gist folks no day today. I won't say name. I feel like we take us out. Very brilliant show. But we're gonna have to continue on this vein, especially what you were talking about, Kunle, about how the U.S. had its own coup on Delaware and destroyed Oklahoma, the Black independent economic city. We're going to talk about that next week. Take us out, Afolabi.